And our theme today is really around building that trust. And we had a conversation with Edwin in the beginning, and just realizing and reflecting on the importance of these topics. So an example, we developed a first of its kind open contracting portal in Makueni County in Kenya. And one of the feedback we had from the government, from the county government once they started using the portal, this was, for those in Kenya, this was Governor Kivutha Kibwana at the time, cited that the county saved 30 million Kenyan shillings from the road department as a result of the portal. So this shows the immense potential of this movement creating that kind of efficiency. So why this session today, and why did we think with to bring up these topics? As the digital age evolves, e-government procurement system, open contracting, and beneficial ownership offer immense potential. And this session is also coming at a critical time where Kenya and other countries are adopting electronic government procurement system. So for today, this is not just the usual conversation about the challenges that we face in the continent, but it's also about the solutions that data and technology can bring in this fight against corruption. So we look forward to hearing the valuable experience from our esteemed panelists, but also from all of you in the room. We hope that you'll contribute to this discussion and we can leverage data and technology to tackle corruption. Thank you for being here today and looking forward to your insights. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hamjambo. Karibu Kenya. Awesome. Thank you very much for joining this panel today. My name is Titus Gitonga. I work with Transparency International Kenya as Programs Coordinator for our public finance management work. And I want to join my colleague, Mariam, from Development Gateway in welcoming you to this session. And I associate with all the remarks that she has made on why we thought it was important to have this session. Transparency International in Kenya, as part of the OGP Forum, co-leads the beneficial ownership commitment. That is commitment number 4 under our National Action Plan number 5. And we co-lead this theme together with the Business Registration Services, which is a government entity. And for us, getting beneficial ownership transparency through public registers that are available not only to the public, but not only to the investigative agencies, but also to the public, is an important step in trying to break the corruption chains, in trying to identify what networks of corruption are there and how these can be broken. So we are looking forward to very meaningful discussions today and takeaways from our different experiences in our different countries, and hopefully we'll find some very innovative ways to advance the use of data for the fight against corruption. Thank you very much and welcome.
Round of applause for Titus. Now, thank you to the organizers. Development Gateway and Transparency International Kenya. And now is the time you've all been waiting for. The good stuff, the substantive stuff, what we actually chose, why we chose to be here. And to kick us off, we have His Excellency, Mr. Johnny Tarkpah, who is the Deputy Minister, Administration from the Ministry of Information, Culture Affairs and Tourism in Liberia. He'll set the tone for us for the subsequent conversations we're going to have, and he's actually going to talk to us about the importance of open data in anti-corruption. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and I'm happy to be here. Like you said, like you just heard from him, my name is Johnny Tarkpah, and I'm the POC for OGP in Liberia, and I'm the Deputy Minister for Administration at the Ministry of Information, Cultural Affairs, and Tourism. where OGP is housed. Just to give you a quick background, Liberia joined the OGP in 2011. That means we're one of the founding members, if history serves that very well. We just launched our 5th National Action Plan in February of this year. So we have a bit of work to do. If you're a POC here, you know what I'm talking about. So let's talk about tackling corruption through data. As we all know, and it is usually said, that corruption thrives in secrecy. But data enhances 3 things. First, transparency, accountability, and efficiency. We also know that open data in public procurement and beneficiary system exposes 3 key things, and I'd like to just go over them very quickly because of the sake of time. First, it exposes conflict of interest in the public domain. Second, it also exposes fraudulent transaction and the intent to defraud the system. The third, it also exposes corruption in the wider and general sense. Key in this fight, however, from what we've learned so far from Liberia, there are a couple of things that we must consider when we're talking about the fight against corruption as far as data is concerned, regarding both beneficiary ownership and public contracting. First, there must be an inter-agency collaboration. So let's look at it this way, from this perspective. The institutions that are managing data as far as BO is concerned and public contracting is concerned, there must be that concerted network between these agencies and those agencies that are graft-fighting institutions in our various countries. From what we've learned with this collaboration, all institutions and agencies have the ability to determine and to be able to crack through the net if there are, to be able to determine if there are intents or if there are, for example, PEP, political individuals who are trying to usurp the system. One thing we always talk about, the political will. And the political will comes in 2 dimensions. First, there must be that cascading political will that comes from on top to the bottom. In other words, politicians that are placed in areas of trust that are supposed to help to enhance the system and the fight against corruption must allow the beneficiary ownership system and the contracting process with PPCC or public procurement to run unhindered. There are times where politicians will try to usurp the system in order for them to have their own political will infiltrated or for them to have their own political gains. So there must be a process where politicians allow the system to run unhindered. The third one, civil society. Because civil society is always seen as that part of the country or that part of society that can be relied upon. They must be allowed to have access to meaningful data when it comes to decision making. This is very important. For government institutions that procurement and beneficiary ownership processes, there are times where the dependency or the ability to trust government institutions and policymakers may not necessarily be there across the country. But if civil society to the table, we empower them and we allow them to be part of this process. This enhances the entire process, the entire value chain of the beneficiary ownership process, the procurement process as well. So that's key. There are some key lessons learned from Liberia. When this administration took over, our entire procurement process was manual. We all know what the manual system does to the integrity system. So the government decided it was going to automate the entire e-procurement process. This is key. When these processes are automated, what it does is that it removes that content of human interaction or human intervention. And that reduces people's ability to usurp the system, and it will lead to a process where corruption becomes minimized in the process. We have to our legal and regulatory frameworks. There are institutions that are responsible to help in adjudicating cases of corruption that emanates from beneficiary ownership and procurement processes. They must be allowed to work free, fair of political interaction. And that was something that we experienced during the past administration. So I think this is a very good lesson for all of us. You are part of an OGP country, or whether you are not part of an OGP country. And finally, digitization plays a very meaningful role in the entire process. When all of these processes are digitized, people's ability to infiltrate the system and commit fraud is reduced significantly. I will stop here for now and allow the discussion to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. I'm sorry I jump-started your career into His Excellency earlier, but I think we speak about the future of the great work that you're doing in Liberia. Now, if that was not the way to set the tone for these conversations, I don't know what is, because he's taken us through the experience. And I think one thing that's very clear is that it's not easy to digitize an entire system. It's not easy to make sure that you get that buy-in from on the political will aspects, and you cascade it down. But it's also important to think about what risks are inherent when you're talking about manual systems and how the need for digitization really help them get on the path towards anti-corruption fight and accountable governments. With that said, we have just the right people in the room to have this conversation and to follow through. On the board behind the panelists, you can see the different countries that are represented: Nigeria, Kenya, I can see the UK somewhere there, Ghana, Zimbabwe. But we also have a mix of participants from government, from foundations. We can see grassroots initiatives. And for me, multilateral development institutions. And I think this is just the right cohort to have this conversation. Allow me to then take us to the first person who's going to sort of talk to us about the experiences that they've had in e-government procurement implementation in Africa, because I want him to also set conversation picking up from where the Honorable Minister has left, and how open contracting data standards improve transparency in procurement. For that, we have Mr. Edwin Muhumuza. Edwin is the head of Africa at the Open Contracting Partnership, where he leads efforts to transform public procurement across the continent. He works closely with the government teams in multiple African countries, leveraging open data, civic, business engagement, and research to design procurement systems. Edwin, over to you.
I think this is a timely conversation, given the things going on globally, but also the theme of this OGP summit, which is about rebuilding trust. And there are very few places where you have to rebuild trust than tackling the public procurement question. Public procurement accounts for a significant proportion of most public expenditure in the world, but most particularly in Africa, where the state still provides most of the services. the average estimate around African countries that 60% of public expenditure is through public procurement. Now that causes two important things. One, the fact that that becomes an attraction for corruption because that's where the money is. The second is that that's the avenue through which public services can be delivered. So if it's not done well, you don't have the public services, water, health, electricity, which are usually the issues that build trust among the population, as we've been hearing over the last few days. So it's therefore an important aspect of the public financial management system, and sometimes where least investment for reform is done. Even if you have a very good budget, and it's even open, that budget can only be translated into the services that you want to deliver through public procurement. So public procurement is the anchor for PFM work in any country. Now, as I've already noted, it's also the #1 corruption risk, and this is exacerbated by the fact that we're still operating manual processes in most of the African countries. By our observation, only 37% of African countries have some semblance of an e-procurement system. About 17% are in the process of developing an e-procurement system, and of these, even those that have e-procurement systems from end to end, only 11% have what the Honorable Minister talked about, open data. If you don't have open data for public procurement that's published in a format that's easily available for many stakeholders, and there are many stakeholders in public procurement, it sometimes affects trust. And when you have low trust in public procurement, you tend to have limited competition because the good players tend to run away from such a system. They're not sure that it's going to be a free and fair process. And that's why automation becomes important. The other reason why you need to automate procurement systems is that it's again the anchor of other initiatives. For example, beneficial ownership transparency. One of the low-hanging use cases for beneficial ownership transparency is public contracts. Because right now, for most countries, there's disjointed systems between the procurement data as well as the beneficial ownership registers. If you have the beneficial owners, the ones of companies that are getting public contracts, as I've already noted, this is 60% of the budget, you have a spotlight to tell you where the money is going, but also to stop a lot of the insider trading. So publishing open data in public procurement provides you one very low-hanging use case for beneficial ownership registers. So the problem that exists in most of the African countries, and maybe could even add the Middle East, is that procurement is still manual, and so you don't have data that's easily available for different purposes. For monitoring, how public procurement is working at a macro level, that means you're checking whether the reform efforts you're undertaking are having any impact, but also at a micro level to determine where challenges are in the procurement process. For example, one of the complaints around public procurement is the inefficiencies, that there are a lot of delays. Without good quality data, it's very difficult to identify where the bottlenecks are. And if you can't identify where the bottlenecks are, you're not going to undertake appropriate measures to unlock those bottlenecks. The other issue is that there's no central depository, including like countries like Kenya, which have made some steps around the PPIP at the PPRA. You still have the counties with their own PPIPs. PPIP is the Public Procurement Information Portals. And these are not speaking to each other. So you have portals, yes, but disjointed in a way that you cannot have an aggregate depository for meaningful macro reforms around public procurement. And they're also not searchable. If civil society, which is supposed to be the eyes and ears of society, as well as the media, if I add the media, is to play their oversight role in public contracts, one of the things they need is, of course, information. They're not going to monitor in the dark. But if these portals don't have procurement data that's in an easily accessible format or searchable, that I am in Makwini County and I go to the PPIP portal, I check which procurements have been undertaken to be delivered in my county as the first basis for which to identify the projects to monitor, it becomes very difficult for all these integrated efforts we are talking about these few days around the OGP challenge. So we need to understand that this is a very important aspect of the public financial management system, public procurement. It is one of the areas which lead to low trust in government on the corruption side, perceptions of corruption, but also on the lack of services. Because if you have a poor procurement system, you're not going to have the services that you need, and that is what breaks trust in government. So the way forward would be, number one, to reinforce the automation processes for public procurement. Unfortunately, despite its importance, as I've already noted, it's the one area among the public financial management systems that's still largely manual. In most countries you go to, the budget system is now automated. The integrated financial management system has automated the payment system. But the anchor between the budget and the payment system, which is procurement, is still largely manual. And that's like having to cross a river without a bridge, because the bridge is public procurement between the plans and the payment system or the implementation. So we need to support efforts around automation with e-procurement. The other is that there must be open data in those e-procurement systems, even where you have just the portals. And by open data, we don't mean or just make everything completely accessible, because the principles of public procurement, of course, have some of these contradictory, no, they're not contradictory, but on one hand you have confidentiality, on the other hand you have transparency. But these are well defined in the procurement laws. What is confidential? For example, the evaluation process is confidential, but what is public? The public is what is supposed to be transparent. Who is getting these contracts, at what amount, and to do what? So we need to have open data capability, and as Open Contracting Partnership, we've been supporting a number of countries. We're engaging with a number of partners around the region to have the Open Contracting Data Standard, which is the gold standard for publishing procurement data. I'm happy that within the region, Kenya recently became an OCDS publisher from last year, but that's not an end in itself. You must translate that capability into use cases. Use to link it to the open ownership, beneficial ownership data, but also to allow, for example, civil society organizations to use that information, or the media, to probe what's going on in public procurement. We're time bad. For the moment, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edwin. Round of applause for Edwin. Yeah, that's all me for giving him the side eye, because I was like, okay, we have a few panelists, but the information he's given us is so pertinent. Think about it. He said about 37% of African countries have some kind of EGP, right? That means there's a lot still that we need to get to, and especially when he mentioned the fact that we have to link our budgets and our e-procurement processes so that we can be able to use that data. Now, from EGP, let's move on to BOT, which is Beneficial Ownership Transparency, and we want to understand how beneficial ownership transparency data integrates with procurement and financial accountability. What are the best practices? For that session, I want to invite Favour Ime, who is the Senior Regional Manager for Africa at Open Ownership. She leads Open Ownership's technical support to national governments in the Africa region, committed to beneficial ownership transparency by helping them implement legal, technical, and other changes required for BOT objectives. Favour, over to you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you, distinguished panelists and ladies and gentlemen in the room. It's a pleasure to share some thoughts about the topic with you today. I'll start by saying this. If we are really serious about tackling corruption, then we must move beyond the conversations that we have and start building legislative and digital systems that will help us identify the natural persons who own and control the companies that are winning multi-billion US dollar contracts to build roads, to build hospitals, to build schools. We need to understand who is actually playing in our economy. And these are some of the questions that the two last speakers have started to address in their submissions. Now, I'll talk about two things very briefly. One is about the key elements of setting up a beneficial ownership register, without which there can't be any interaction with public procurement, public finance. And the first one is, one question we need to ask ourselves as countries is, why exactly are we doing this? Why do we need this register? Is it to fight, corruption? Is it for money laundering purposes? Is it to improve public trust between the government and its citizens? And that's a key thing that has come out in conversations over the past day. And that's very important because the why will inform the design of your legislation as well as your systems. Now, the second one, which I think is very critical, is who needs to be involved? And that's the point that the Honorable Minister mentioned about concerted network. You cannot be successful at any reform without putting the people at the center. There's no point, which is why it's critical that we have engagements like this where we bring together private sector, we bring together government agencies, we bring together CSOs to understand what are the different interests in the room and what are the critical roles that the different actors can play in bringing this vision to life. This is an ecosystem we're talking about. The corporate registry can develop a BO register, but if your procurement authorities or your CSOs don't understand the value of the information, then truly, where does the impact come? So this is a very critical element of building or setting up a successful BO register. Now, the third thing I want to flag is, are institutions equipped to maintain a register? What we're seeing is a lot of countries want to brag about having a BO register. It's fantastic to have one. But to what extent are we equipping our institutions to be able to maintain that register, but not just maintain it, optimize the information that is in that register? We've seen fantastic examples like Nigeria, which is where I come from very proudly. We have developed Africa's first BO register that is free, public, anyone can access it right now. Botswana joined us last week, and they launched their own BO register, which is fantastic. But again, the impacts can only come if the corporate registries come together, the public procurement authorities come together, and they are speaking to each other on exactly how we can institutionalize the use of the information throughout the contracting process. In Kenya in 2022, the companies' regulations were amended. And it now provides for all companies doing business with government to provide their BO information. But interestingly, they're only supposed to provide this information or publish this information for companies that have been awarded contracts. So when you think about that, the relevance of that information within the Kenyan context only comes alive at the end of the procurement process. So you then miss the entire journey where you would have used that information to inform that decision-making. Kenya has ACPO, the procurement policy around giving 30% of procurement to women, people of disabilities, and one more category I don't remember now. Now, without having that information during that process, how can you really say that you are enforcing that policy and giving those pockets of contracts to women-owned businesses. Because I could just be, on the face of the company, a woman, but actually there's a man that is controlling me behind the scenes. And that's the purpose of yes, that's very true. And that's the purpose of beneficial ownership transparency. We need to be able to understand who the ultimate owners and controllers of these companies are. So if we have companies, there was a very interesting example in Kenya, and I'll try and wrap up with this. Not in Kenya, in Ghana, sorry. A few years ago, there was a fumigation contract that was awarded to 11 companies, ladies and gentlemen. 11 companies awarded a fumigation contract to carry out some sanitization work across the government of Ghana. Now, some investigative journalists, again, the critical role of CSOs as watchdogs, they conducted some investigations a few years later. And unfortunately, the 11 companies, ladies and gentlemen, were all owned and ultimately controlled by one man. Tell me, can we truly say that that procurement process was competitive, yes or no? Can we truly say it was fair, yes or no? But if that information was available at the point of contracting, definitely the procurement authority would have flagged that. So it's very critical for us not just to have 55 member states in Africa all have registers. So what? So registers are simply an indication of progress with implementation. Registers are not an indication of impact. Data use within public spending, within public procurement, within extractives, that is really where the impact is. I'll rest my case here in the interest of time and I'll hand back to Robert. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Favour. So what? So what, right? Now, I love that. That's where we're getting into the crux of it, right? Because we've been told you need to have an EGP, then you have a BOT, but are you making use of the data? Because that's where the substance of it is required. Allow me then to introduce us to our next speaker, Saliou Diop from Senegal, who is a distinguished expert in governance and anti-corruption with extensive experience in legal research, policy development, and strategic monitoring. He's the head of Strategic Monitoring Studies and Action Research Division at Senegal's National Office for the Fight Against Fraud and Corruption. Now, Saliou is going to parler en français. So for those of you who do not understand French, this is the time for you to get your head pieces and so that we can have him go through his session. Saliou is going to take us through the national approaches to fraud detection. So now we're getting into how do you use this data to fight fraud. Saliou, over to you.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le modérateur. Bonjour tout le monde. Permettez-moi tout d'abord, avant de rentrer dans le vif du sujet, de remercier au nom de la délégation du Sénégal, le gouvernement du Kenya, l'OGP, Transparency International et toutes les personnes qui ont contribué à la réussite de ce sommet OGP 2025. Je vais vous parler en réalité de l'approche sénégalaise en matière de détection de fraude à l'aide des données dans un premier temps et terminer par ce qu'on appelle le renforcement des institutions de lutte contre la corruption. En ce qui concerne le premier point, l'approche sénégalaise en matière de détection de fraude et de la corruption, la précision qu'il faut faire dans un premier temps, c'est que la fraude est une forme de corruption conformément à la Convention des Nations Unies. Et cette forme de corruption impacte négativement sur le développement des États africains, sur le plan économique, sur le plan social. À titre de référence, une étude de Transparency International nous a démontré que l'argent illicite issu de la corruption, issu de la fraude en Afrique est planqué dans les banques étrangères, c'est 10 fois plus que l'aide publique au développement. Quel enseignement faut-il tirer de cette étude? L'enseignement principal, c'est quoi? L'Afrique, en réalité, peut se développer sans l'aide publique au développement, mais à condition que l'argent public soit géré en bon escient et de manière transparente. Donc, c'est là le défi en réalité, la gestion transparente de nos ressources publics. S'agissant des données, nous, en tant qu'organe de lutte contre la corruption, ou bien les organes anticorruption de manière générale, ce sont les données en réalité qui font l'existence des institutions de lutte contre la corruption ou bien des organes de contrôle en réalité. Parce que lorsqu'on parle de lutte contre la corruption, particulièrement les investigations ou bien la prévention, il faut avoir des données. Et lorsqu'on parle des données, il y a deux types de données. Il y a les données physiques et les données numériques. Lorsqu'on parle de données physiques, on fait référence à la dénonciation, on fait référence au témoignage, parce qu'en réalité, n'importe quelle personne sur l'étendue du territoire national, quand il constate qu'il y a des faits de faute ou bien de corruption dans son institution ou bien quelque part, il a la possibilité de faire cette dénonciation et cette personne est protégée. Et cette dénonciation peut se faire de manière anonyme. On a aussi la possibilité de faire ce qu'on appelle le renseignement, qui sont des modes en réalité de collecte des données, mais aussi il y a ce qu'on appelle les états financiers. Et même dans un autre registre, aujourd'hui, avec la loi portant création de l'OFNAC, nous avons la possibilité d'accéder à des données bancaires. Dans n'importe quelle banque du Sénégal, l'Office national de lutte contre la fraude et la corruption a la possibilité de saisir cette banque pour avoir des informations bancaires de n'importe quelle personne. Et ces informations sont utilisées dans le cadre de la lutte contre la corruption. Un autre point qui me paraît intéressant, parce que vous savez que le Sénégal est un pays minier, pétrolier et gazier. Aujourd'hui, nous avons le registre des bénéficiaires effectifs, qui est un aspect très important. En réalité, ce registre nous permet de détecter les bénéficiaires effectifs des entreprises. Parce qu'en réalité, il y a beaucoup de cas de fraude, beaucoup de dissimulation par rapport au registre des bénéficiaires effectifs. Parce que si les bénéficiaires effectifs ne sont pas identifiés, c'est une porte ouverte à l'évasion fiscale et à la fraude. Autrement dit, ce sont des aspects en réalité très importants et l'État du Sénégal dispose d'un mécanisme qui permet en réalité d'identifier les bénéficiaires effectifs. S'agissant des données électroniques, c'est une question très importante en réalité parce qu'au Sénégal, nous avons ce qu'on appelle le portail des marchés publics. Donc, c'est une plateforme numérique centrale en réalité, décidée aux fournisseurs et à toute personne physique ou morale en réalité qui est intéressée par les marchés publics. Donc, dans cette plateforme numérique, dans cette plateforme portail des marchés publics, il y a la publication des données sur les appels d'offres et sur les attributions des marchés. Toute personne physique qui se sent lésée dans le cadre de la passation des marchés a la possibilité de dénoncer les faits de fraude ou de corruption. L'OFNAC, en tant qu'organe de lutte contre la corruption, qui est l'institution nationale chargée de la lutte contre la corruption, a accès à ces données et souvent, dans le cadre de nos enquêtes, on les utilise en réalité pour pouvoir documenter en réalité nos dossiers d'enquête. Donc, ce sont des données qui sont extrêmement importantes. Dans le cadre aussi de la coopération internationale, nous travaillons avec Interpol. Interpol qui dispose d'une plateforme internationale en réalité, dans le cadre non seulement de la lutte contre la corruption, mais aussi du blanchiment de capitaux. On coopère avec l'Interpol. Donc, avec cette plateforme internationale, nous avons accès aux données. Et même dans le cadre de la coopération internationale avec d'autres pays, la Côte d'Ivoire, l'île Maurice et autres, avec qui nous avons signé des conventions, il y a la possibilité d'échanger des données. Par exemple, si une personne a été identifiée dans le cadre de la fraude ou de la corruption ou de blanchiment d'argent, on a la possibilité, avec la coopération de travail avec ces différents pays, et d'échanger des informations, et même parfois de faire ce qu'on appelle des missions conjointes pour détecter les faits de fraude ou de corruption. Donc, du point de vue, en réalité, des données, c'est ce que nous avons au Sénégal, et ces données, en réalité, sont indispensables et sont indissociables à la lutte contre la corruption. Parce que si vous n'avez pas accès à ces données-là, vous n'avez pas la possibilité de lutter contre la corruption. Ce qui est intéressant aujourd'hui, et c'est une opportunité en réalité, parce que le Sénégal vient de lancer sa nouvelle stratégie numérique, qui est dénommée le New Deal technologique. Ce New Deal technologique, en réalité, a pour ambition de faire du Sénégal un leader de l'économie numérique en Afrique. Et cette stratégie s'inscrit en réalité dans le cadre de l'agenda national de transformation du Sénégal 2050. La stratégie a été lancée il y a de cela un mois par le président de la République. Autrement dit, aujourd'hui, il y a un processus de transformation numérique du Sénégal. Et même dans le cadre des marchés publics, il y a un projet qui est en cours, qui consiste en réalité à digitaliser la passation des marchés en tant que tel. Parce que comme nous le savons en réalité, la digitalisation est un mécanisme de prévention de la corruption. Tant que, à chaque fois que vous avez la possibilité d'éviter le contact physique, il y a moins de corruption. Donc aujourd'hui, il y a un processus très avancé en ce qui concerne la réforme des marchés publics pour que tout soit digitalisé et que le contact physique soit évité et par ricochet, c'est un mécanisme en réalité de prévention et de lutte contre la corruption. Sur le deuxième point, les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. C'est une question très importante, d'autant plus qu'en réalité, lorsqu'on parle de la lutte contre la corruption, les institutions de lutte contre la corruption ont besoin d'être renforcées. Et on ne peut pas parler de renforcement des institutions de lutte contre la corruption sans pour autant citer la Convention des Nations Unies de lutte contre la corruption, qui est le seul instrument universel mondial contraignant en matière de lutte contre la corruption, d'autant plus qu'il y a un mécanisme de suivi et d'évaluation des pays. Aujourd'hui, il y a 191 États partis à cette Convention des Nations Unies contre la corruption, et parmi ces États, le Sénégal. Donc, dans le cadre de cette Convention, les États sont régulièrement évalués par rapport à le dispositif anticorruption, particulièrement sur le chapitre 2 qui porte sur les mesures préventives, c'est-à-dire quel est le dispositif en matière de prévention mis en œuvre par le pays. Sur le chapitre 3, l'incrimination, détection de la répression. Quelles sont les incriminations en matière de corruption? Donc, c'est un dispositif très important, mais aussi le chapitre 4, en réalité, qui nous parle de la coopération internationale. Nous savons qu'aujourd'hui, la corruption, c'est un phénomène transnational organisé. Un seul État ne peut pas lutter contre la corruption. Il faut que les États collaborent, il faut que les États coopèrent pour mieux lutter contre la corruption. Donc, c'est ça l'intérêt du chapitre 4 qui porte sur la coopération internationale, mais aussi sur le chapitre 5, qui me paraît très important, parce qu'il porte sur ce qu'on appelle le recouvrement des avoirs. En matière de corruption ou bien d'enrichissement illicite ou bien de malgouvernance de manière générale, certes, c'est vrai, il y a la possibilité d'emprisonner le délinquant. Mais aujourd'hui, sur le plan international, en matière de lutte contre la corruption, il y a le débat qui se pose. Entre mettre une personne en prison ou bien recouvrer ses biens, quel est le plus important? C'est vrai, quand une personne a enfreint la loi, il faut la sanctionner, la mettre en prison, c'est ça le principe. Mais imaginons quelqu'un qui a détourné 50 milliards. Vous préférez l'emprisonner pendant 10 ans. Lorsqu'il a purgé sa peine, il jouit de ces biens-là. Ou bien, vous savez que X a détourné 50 milliards, vous négociez non seulement avec lui, pour qu'il y ait une transaction de recouvrer cet argent. Parce qu'en réalité, ce qui est plus important aujourd'hui par rapport au débat sur la lutte contre la corruption, c'est le recouvrement de ces avoirs. Ce sont des milliards qui échappent aux économies nationales. Donc, d'où l'intérêt en réalité de recouvrer. Et au Sénégal, nous avons ce qu'on appelle un organe, c'est-à-dire l'ONRAC, qui est l'Office national chargé du recouvrement des avoirs criminels et qui joue un rôle très important. Peut-être terminer sur un aspect très important. Parce qu'en réalité, lorsqu'on parle de la lutte contre la corruption, c'est une question de volonté politique. Qu'on ne se leurre pas. Tant qu'il n'y a pas la volonté politique, on ne pourra jamais résoudre le problème de la corruption. Mais au Sénégal, il est heureux de constater avec la troisième alternance politique, nous avons un président de la République en réalité qui a comme ligne de conduite deux principes, la droiture, la probité et l'exemplarité. Donc ce sont des principes essentiels en réalité aujourd'hui en matière de gouvernance au Sénégal. Et il y a des réformes en vue qui sont essentielles et qui vont impacter sur le PGO. Il y a des projets qui sont en cours. L'accès à l'information. On n'a pas encore une loi sur l'accès à l'information. Bientôt, une loi sur l'accès à l'information sera votée. Et en réalité, ça va faciliter l'accès aux données. Parce que ça permettra à tout citoyen en réalité d'avoir accès aux données. La protection des lanceurs d'alerte. Nous n'avons pas encore une loi sur la protection des lanceurs d'alerte, mais il y a un projet en vue qui, du point de vue technique, est disponible, mais il ne reste que son adoption par l'Assemblée nationale. Quand vous protégez ceux qui dénoncent la corruption, en réalité, vous encouragez les gens à dénoncer. Et cette dénonciation va donner de la matière à l'organe de lutte contre la corruption dans le cadre de ces investigations. La déclaration de patrimoine. Nous avons aujourd'hui un système de déclaration de patrimoine, mais en réalité, ce système est un peu restreint. Et le président veut élargir cette déclaration de patrimoine. C'est-à-dire tout agent public, tout fonctionnaire sera bientôt dans l'obligation de déclarer son patrimoine. Et terminer peut-être sur un point, la réforme de l'organe de lutte contre la corruption qui me paraît très importante parce qu'en réalité, pour lutter contre la corruption, il faut toujours réformer. Parce que comme j'ai l'habitude de le dire, la lutte contre la corruption, c'est un combat de tous les jours. Les institutions de lutte contre la corruption ont besoin de se conformer aux conventions internationales, aux bonnes pratiques pour mieux prévenir, mais aussi lutter contre la corruption. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Saliou. I think that presentation was really excellent because he's been able to sort of cascade the conversation from the EGP to the BOT to the practices that are being undertaken in Senegal. And for me, something that stood out is just the way you mentioned the detection, prevention, and recovery of assets so that you see the entire chain. But importantly, you brought in an aspect of collaboration. So we set the point on collaboration before, interagency collaboration, but you've taken it further. How do we collaborate with other institutions globally to be able to prevent corruption? Now, allow me to move swiftly to Dr. Yulita Mitei. She's the scientist, actually, on the panel. And Dr. Yulita holds a PhD in chemistry. But for purposes, the reason she's here today is actually to talk to us as the deputy governor of Nandi County. And she makes history as the first woman to hold the position in both that county, which is Nandi County, and in the North Rift. She's a distinguished academic, but more importantly, she's passionate about community empowerment, and she actively advocates for persons with disabilities. We want her to take us through what they've been able to do in Nandi County. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tonga. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm greatly honored to be speaking in this panel today, and on behalf of the growing movement of counties in Kenya and across Africa committed to transparency and accountability. In Nandi, we have learned that transparency is just a principle. Isn't just a principle, it's a necessity. And for too long, citizens have struggled to track government performance, leaving a gap between promises and delivery. Today, I want to share how we are bridging that gap and why every county and country in Africa needs to follow suit. Allow me to deliver greetings from my boss, His Excellency Governor Stephen Sang, who would have loved to be here, but has also nominated me as the OGP champion at the county, and wishes us well as we discuss in these 3 days. In Nandi, we have embraced innovative tools to make transparency a reality. One of the products is the Nandi Data Desk, which was co-created together with the civil society. It's a game changer. It centralizes information on budgets, projects, and progress, empowering citizens to hold us accountable. Similarly, our adoption of open contracting, following the footsteps of counties like Makueni and Elgeyo Marakwet, has transformed procurement in our county. By making contract details public, we ensure fairness. We reduce corruption, and we deliver quality goods and services to our people. These tools are not just technical solutions, they are commitments to our citizens, proving that county governments can lead the way in open governance. Transparency alone isn't enough. Service delivery must be the heartbeat of governance in Nandi. And I remember what a statement from Governor Sakaja yesterday, that development is a joint effort. It is not an exhibition. In Nandi, we've seen that when citizens are engaged, services improve. Public participation, therefore, is not a formality. It's the foundation of responsive governance. And starting last financial year, we have moved from deciding projects at a central location to allowing the citizens to identify projects that are a priority to them. And 50% of development funds now are being decided at the local level. And we have, in every ward, we have 30 wards now in Nandi, and in every ward we have a 7-member project identification committee that coordinates the views and the priorities that come from the public, which then make into the final list of projects that are going to be funded in any financial year, following county integrated development plan, an annual development plan, and therefore in that annual development plan, the citizens get to nominate or to select projects that are going to be funded in the following financial year. Across Africa, counties and countries must prioritize citizens' engagement, from budget forums to project monitoring involving our people, ensures that resources reach where they are needed most. I'd like to say that when we went this direction, we have been able to realize that priorities down at the grassroots may not necessarily be what we would have prioritized at the central. Because in the first term of office, we were trying to be, I do not want to say we were equitable, we were equal. We were trying to equalize everything. But in this new model of equitable ward development, it is now the citizens who prioritize, and in certain instances now we realize more citizens are prioritizing roads and ECD centers, that is the early childhood education centers, whereas probably we would, from our end, we probably would have wanted to do water, we want to do roads, we want to do ECDs, we want to do dispensaries across in the same manner. But now the citizens have their say, and we are able to now respond to what would be their priority. Nandi's journey shows that the citizens have a voice. Government deliver better. This is a call to action for all of us. So let's make public participation a cornerstone of our service delivery. And to make this vision a reality, we need the national government to step up so as to support with technical support, and also to provide funding. And in instances like now what is happening in Kenya, where we only have about 7 counties that have enrolled onto OGP, for us to be able to have the 47 county governments actually enrolling onto OGP, and so that we can all be able to provide for more access to information, transparency, accountability. I think this is one of the things we cannot do alone as county governments. We need support from the national government level, because in any case, the country has already enrolled onto AGP several years ago. Now, one of the things that I was asked to discuss is on the challenges on open contracting. Implementing open contracting at local government or county level can bring significant benefits, as already identified. However, we have a number of challenges, and that one of them is the fact that local governments often operate with constrained budgets and staffing. So implementing open contracting requires technical expertise, training and infrastructure, and sometimes we are constrained because of resources. We also have technical barriers where many local governments lack the necessary IT infrastructure or digital tools to publish procurement data in an open, accessible format. Smaller companies to adopt and maintain sophisticated systems. There's also one other challenge of resistance to change. Bureaucratic criteria or resistance from staff accustomed to traditional procurement processes can hinder adoption. Some officials may fear increased scrutiny or loss of control over procurement decisions. Another challenge is data quality and standardization, so that ensuring that procurement data is accurate, complete, formatted consistently, that is adhering to standards like open contracting data standard, can be difficult, especially if existing systems are outdated or fragmented. Another challenge is the legal and regulatory constraints, where local governments must navigate a complex web of state or national laws governing procurement, data privacy, and public disclosure. These regulations may conflict with or limit the scope of open contracting initiatives. One other challenge is in the low public awareness or engagement. And even, I remember when we transitioned to open contracting, we had to bring in our contractors to sensitize and to prepare them to be able to participate and bid online. So even when data is made available, citizens, local businesses, or civil society groups may not know how to access or to use it. thus reducing the impact of transparency effort. We also have another challenge of risk of corruption or pushback. In areas where corruption is entrenched, open contracting could threaten vested interests, leading to pushback from officials, contractors, or other stakeholders who benefit from opaque processes. Finally, procurement processes are complex. So local governments often handle a variety of contracts ranging from small-scale purchases to large infrastructure projects, making it challenging to standardize and disclose all processes effectively. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say we are honored to be part of OGP, and we are excited to demonstrate what this has done for us as a county government and to the citizens of Nandi County. And we want to wish you every bit of success as we engage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yulita Mitei. You can tell she used to be in the classroom by how succinct her points have been, right? So I don't need to recap, I don't need to add anything, but she set the excellent segue into public participation and the role of civil society, because we've seen it's crucial that you get all stakeholders on board. Allow me to introduce Dennis Mwafulirwa, who will take us through the role of CSOs in ensuring government accountability. Dennis is a social worker with over a decade of experience, spanning human rights, good governance, social justice, and community development. Dennis put a small thing in his bio that I think is very important for us to share. He says he firmly believes that true achievement lies in the small acts of service that empower others to become masters of their own destiny. Dennis, in 5 minutes, please, take us through mastering of destinies.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you to the government of Kenya and organizers of this summit for having us this afternoon, but also through the days of this summit. I was asked to talk about the role of civil society in relation to public procurement, but also data. I would like to start by sharing a personal experience. So in 2020, that was when I was introduced to open contracting. I was trained in open contracting by the organization that I'm now working with, the Center for Human Rights and Rehabilitation, CHRR. And at that point, I was just a regular citizen doing other things. And after that training, I started paying attention to information that was being shared in the public domain, in the newspapers, on Facebook, and the like. And I came across information from one of the public institutions, the Central Medical Stores. I will mention the name because now this is a positive story. After looking at the information that was coming up, I noticed that same organizational companies were being contracted over and over again. And I was wondering, are there no other companies that fit to be awarded these contracts? Or is just these companies that can get this kind of contract? So I started paying attention to that, and then I sent my request for information to the public institution, because this information was not readily available. So I was looking at contract information online. There was nothing on their website. There was nothing in any other places that I could look at. So I went to the office, asked for information, but this information did not come forth. So mute refusal. I kept receiving responses. You come back, no, we are consulting our lawyers. and all that kind of thing. Now, my colleague here talked about the importance of responsive systems and structures, systems that put citizens at the center of that response. So this is where open data comes into play, where procurement is concerned. That process resulted into an appeal. I went to the Malawi Human Rights Commission responsible for access to information, and they eventually made a determination that the MDA needed to provide me with the information. So they gave me the information, which provided me with enough information to make informed decision about what was going on, what next steps I needed to follow, and the like. So the institution that I'm working with, Center for Human Rights and Rehabilitation, is one of the CSOs that supports open contracting. And one of the areas that look at is capacity building of CSOs, but also of citizens. When we are talking of CSOs, or when we are talking about civil society, we should remember that citizens are at the center of that. I was talking to a colleague from Kenya here yesterday, how we sometimes think, position CSOs separately and the public, the citizens themselves separately, which creates another problem on its own. So now the MDA, Central Medical Stores, was awarded, was given an award last year, an award for being one of the most open MDAs in Malawi, so last year. So kudos to the initiative that happened. Why am I sharing this story? When we talk about open data and thinking about citizens being at the center, when we are thinking about public participation, you are looking at how are people going to access that information. There is a talk about digitalization. Yes, it is important that we digitalize our process. We make our processes very responsive in ways that also help to curb corruption and the like. But we should also make it accessible. That is where the role of civil society comes into play. Making it accessible means that the information is in meaningful way. Language, you think about language, you share the information in a language that can be accessed by the general public. If you talk about civil society, they will probably understand English in Malawi, but if you talk about the general masses that are to benefit from this information, then it would be a problem. The literacy rate in Malawi is very low, and I know this is a common thing across Africa. So how meaningful and accessible is the information that we are sharing so that it reaches to the people that we need to reach. Number two, you're looking at capacity strengthening. For us as civil society, for the citizens to be able to meaningfully participate, to be able to use the data that we are talking about, whether digitally or otherwise, we need to enhance their capacity. They should be able to know that this information exists, but they should also be able to use the information. Sometimes we put information that people can look at it but not make sense of that particular information. Then that information is useless. We need to build capacity of citizens, but also make the information readily accessible to the masses. The other thing that we are looking at in terms of the role of civil society is to mobilize the general public around demanding this access to information. So that's an important part, but to do that, civil society requires resources. And that's a gap that most civil society would have in terms of making that responsive. So I'll probably stop there now and ask the moderator to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I know you've been posting your questions online using Menti, so we're still tracking the questions. And I like what Dennis has said. You need access to the information. CSOs need access to the information. And then we need to be able to build and strengthen the capacity of the people that are going to use that information to hold governments to account. Now, allow me to move on to a final speaker. I know we're running a little late, but Philip, no pressure, because you're standing between lunch and an excellent presentation. So, Philip Nyakundi Gichana is the Africa Policy Director at Global Financial Integrity. Philip is an experienced drafter and trainer on policy and legislative development and a crusader for good governance. What he's going to do for us today is actually show us how beneficial ownership data combats financial crimes. Because then we need to understand what is actually happening and what are the things that have been done. Dennis, Philip, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon once more. Because I've just realized I have immense powers here, so if you don't look at me nicely, then I'm going to really disappoint you. But allow me just to begin the conversation and thank my fellow panelists who have set the tone. And it would have been easier for me just to say that I agree with the conversations we've had, and anybody with a contrary opinion, you can pose a question. But I just want to bring it into context, put it into context, and say that it is very important that we have this discussion, and as we are having right now, in the sense that the global dynamics are quite changing fast. And just to bring some little bit of a history, when we talk about illicit financial flows, our mind just races back to the Mbeki report. And that was in 2015. It is now almost 10 years later after that report, the Mbeki report was released. And when it was released in 2015, it was indicating that Africa was losing $50 billion US dollars annually to illicit financial flows. Almost 10 years later, the latest UNCTAD report that was released, I think that was in 2022, 2023, somewhere there, it indicates that we are at almost 86.3, Africa is losing 86.3 billion US dollars a year. Should we be concerned? It is 10 years down the line. We have put in a number of initiatives, just looking at also some few figures. In the African continent, we see that 37 countries in Africa, just almost thereabout the Mideast, have already made commitments to increase beneficial ownership information. And then 23 countries have put the requisite legal frameworks to enhance beneficial ownership transparency in the country. So just a little bit there at the middle. And this is still, it still shows that we have a long way to go in Africa towards ensuring that we increase beneficial ownership transparency. Kenya was mentioned. I'd want not to be the advocate because they didn't share their brief with me to defend them, but I will highlight some of the few things. But I want to just also go back and speak about just an example of a case in Ghana, not because I've seen a friend from Ghana, but just to highlight that while some countries have made progress in terms of beneficial ownership transparency, most countries are still at an nascent stage, so we really can't pinch ourselves so bad and say that we're not doing something, but also to indicate that it is critically important. In the extractive sector that we have been really focused on and just trying to understand, because almost 2/3 of the money that we are losing is through the commercial transactions, and most comes from the extractive sector. So we have been very keen to just understand who are these people who are doing doing business in Africa, and what are they taking out of Africa. An interesting case of, there's a company called Cashiers. I think the Ghanaians in the room could be knowing it. It was registered in 2014, and its name has changed so many times. I don't know if they didn't like the name or there was something behind it. But then as a large-scale company, it became, and investigative journalists became curious about this company, because in an area for gold mining that had been set, for artisanal miners and small-scale miners, was strangely allocated to the company. And this is almost, I think, 72 acres of the acres or hectares of the same was allocated to that company, which is a large-scale mining company. For you know how much it means and what governments are trying to do when they are encouraging, small-scale miners, bringing them the contribution bracket of the extractive sector. But then this was awarded to this company. So investigations ensued, and thanks, this was done by the investigative journalists and local NGOs in Ghana. When investigations ensued, they realized that while the company had 7 directors, 5 were curious and they were foreigners. Out of these 5 foreigners, 3 of them, and I suspect they are lawyers, so lawyers don't look at me badly, they had already been disbarred from practice in their respective countries. And 2 of them were actually convicted of fraud in their respective countries. Now the 2 other partners who happen to be Ghanaians and who just hold 1% of the shareholding of that company had 0 criminal record. So then it brings you to a question: who are these people transacting in Africa, and why are we allowing them to, continue practicing and taking, these profits out of Africa? Just to bring it closer home, and this is where I'd want to just close. We say Africa is the richest continent. Don't we say so? Yeah, but it's on paper at the moment. So the reality is that one of the richest countries, who happens to be our neighbor here in Congo, very interesting things, and our investigative journalists are showing us that they are quite, there's a reason why we should be concerned, especially on matters beneficial ownership transparency. There is one interesting case that we've just been highlighting. There is a company called Kavichi Sal that is registered in DRC. I don't want to name the person who is the shareholder and the biggest shareholder of that company. But then it is interesting that when the investigations were being conducted, like the gold that is coming from Congo, what was being declared by that company, the company that he owns, and what is being declared, okay, when he was declaring the amount of exports that he's doing from Congo, they were grossly understated. But when it comes to the partner company that is based in Rwanda, when it was declaring how much gold it was exporting, because of all of us know that it was coming from Congo, then the amounts almost tripled in a year. So it means what? The Congolese people are not getting fair value of their minerals. So I just want to conclude and say that there is a lot to be done, and I'm happy my fellow panelists here mentioned that Nigeria, there are countries that are trailblazing, and we'd want, for example, a country like Kenya, to go up to that level where we have the beneficial ownership register that is public to each and everyone. Just a few months ago, there was an interesting case that our beneficial ownership register was hacked. I don't want to commend those who hacked or condemn them. I just want to say that the public is interested in this information. They want to take up the fight on corruption, and the only way we are going to empower them to do that is by making this information public. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Philip. I think I like where you stopped, and I don't want to add to it. But I want to hear from distinguished guests who have joined us here. We have already a number of questions, so we're just going to ask 2 questions, and then I'm going to take one more from the plenary, and then they will answer as they give their closing remarks, 1 minute each. I know you've shared rich insights, but I ask you to please keep it under a minute, and then I invite you to sit with them at lunchtime. Sorry, I'm making lunch plans for you now. But please sit with them, have the conversations, ask them, probe deeper. So if we have one question from the plenary, I'd love to. I'm going to go with the person that put up their hand first. It was right there. Yes. He asked the question. He put up his hand first.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Osai from the Republic of Ghana. Ghana has been mentioned here severally, so I think that I'll have to. And I'm the Director General of the Internal Agency of the Republic of Ghana. Don't you think that merely digitalizing or automating procurement is meaningless unless you automate all the entire PFM cycle, from planning to budgeting, accounting and reporting, and then budgeting and contracting, internal audit, external audit. Then you approach it in a 360 degrees manner. If you pick out only procurement, you're going to have problems, because then it leaves you, procurement and contracting are not the same. It leaves you with another challenge to deal with at the contracting level. And when it comes to auditing, they can jump out. So my advice is we should automate the entire cycle, and let us have an integrated system that will automate the entire cycle. So that is the advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We need to balance it. We have someone who has said something in English. We want someone to say something in French, 30 seconds. And then Titus, can you read us one question, and then we hand over to the panelists.
Okay. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis M. Seyi Diafara, conseiller technique du ministre des Finances et du Budget au sein de la République du Sénégal. J'ai suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt toutes les présentations, juste pour rappeler que la passation des marchés est une niche de corruption, parce que tous les budgets sont exécutés quasiment à travers la passation des marchés, à part les dépenses de salaire et quelques dépenses de fonctionnement. D'où l'intérêt de penser à l'autonomisation des procédures de passation de marché pour lutter contre la corruption et également les coûts d'inefficacité. En général, après évaluation des projets, on constate qu'il y a beaucoup de gaspillage. Pour cela, il faudrait une volonté politique forte de la part des gouvernements, mais également avec l'implication de toutes les parties prenantes, notamment les secteurs privés, les banques, même les organisations de la société civile, et également encourager des initiatives à travers Open Contracting Partnership qui visent à renforcer la transparence au sein des gouvernements et une meilleure sensibilisation et communication avec les populations, parce qu'in fine, ça impacte la vie des populations. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. We're not going to take any more questions, but allow me to ask Titus, please, read for us just 2 comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you can see on the screen, I've gone to a question that has been asked directly to Dr. Yulita on how will the counties be plugged in Kenya's EGP system, especially with their own procurement plans. So of course, you can contextualize this in Kenya, but also in other situations where local governments are trying to align their plans with what is happening. Then we have the first question here that has been, what is the appropriate regulatory framework we should set up in order to fight against corruption in public administration? So there's also that. But I'll be going through the questions, and then even the audience, if you have some answers to some of these questions, you can post them in as comments.
Thank you very much. Panelists, I'll ask you to take on whichever question has been asked and you feel that you can respond to it. I know there's a specific one for Dr. Yulita, but I want you to combine with your closing remarks. They say the last shall be the first, huh? So let's start with, we'll start with Philip and then make our way to the Honorable Deputy Minister. Philip, with your closing remarks and response. There we go.
It's working, sorry. I don't think there was any question sent my way, but I'll say this on the issue of the question on the requisite frameworks that are required in the public sector. I think there are a number, and these were mentioned by the earlier presenter, and I would wish to say that in the public sector, for me, if we are going to ensure that we make sure that public officials declare their wealth, and that wealth declaration is verified by the requisite agencies, and ensure that the requisite agencies are able to conduct lifestyle audits on public officials, then I think we'll be 80%, we will have dealt with the corruption in the public sector. But just to close, is that while the figures for me in Africa, looking at the corruption perception index, looks like we make 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, I think there is a lot to look at. There are examples of countries that are doing very well, and we can take those examples as positives and work towards ensuring that we get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to write on your points there. As much as I'm an advocate of beneficial ownership transparency reforms, I must acknowledge that it is not a silver bullet. It is not the end in itself, which is why we keep saying that it's important to combine that information with the type of information you've mentioned, Philip, around asset declaration and procurement, information about politically exposed persons, extractive licensing, and things like that. I will end by saying that corruption is adaptive, so our solutions must also be adaptive. And just a final quote before I hand over the mic, a register without data use is like a fancy car without fuel. It looks impressive in the driveway, but it's not taking you anywhere. And too many countries build this car, they polish it, they show it off at international conferences, but they forget to put the engine on. That engine is data use in the entire public finance management cycle that the gentleman has mentioned. I thank you for listening, and I'll hand over to the next panelist.
Thank you very much. I wanted to comment on the first comment on the 360-degree open data. I think I agree with that suggestion that we need to look at the full cycle of procurement to be able to address the issues of corruption. Somebody said yesterday, CSOs are the consciousness of democratic governance, and I think at the central of this is the role of civil society as well as citizens. We look at monitoring, advocacy, mobilization, demanding information, and the like. So OGP, for me, gives that framework that could help us to get there. So we need to move this agenda forward. Thank you.
Il n'y a pas de questions spécifiquement concernant, mais peut-être en termes de conclusion, je dirais que les données ouvertes en réalité sont une opportunité en réalité de lutter contre la corruption. Le contexte est favorable pour le Sénégal, bien vrai que nous avons déjà, du point de vue des marchés publics, un processus de digitalisation, mais avec la nouvelle stratégie numérique, ce qu'on appelle la New Deal technologie, d'ici 2 ans, 3 ans, en réalité, en termes de digitalisation des procédures, le Sénégal, en réalité, fera partie des pays qu'on va citer en Afrique et dans le monde en général sur, en réalité, la digitalisation. Et comme j'ai l'habitude de le dire, quand vous digitalisez, vous réduisez le contact physique et par ricochet, en réalité, vous luttez contre la corruption. Il y a en réalité de très bonnes réformes sur la protection des lanceurs d'alerte, l'accès à l'information, le renforcement de l'organe de lutte contre la corruption, mais surtout aussi, l'élargissement de la déclaration de patrimoine, parce que le président de la République aujourd'hui a une ambition, c'est-à-dire que la déclaration de patrimoine soit généralisée envers tous les fonctionnaires, mais aussi des agents publics. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for of county governments to comply. But we are all held accountable by the Controller of Budgets and the Auditor General Office. So even as Kenya has committed to transparency, the regulators, the Controller of Budget approving budgets, approving procurement plans, keeps all of us in check. The Auditor General auditing our processes, auditing our projects, and tracking where finances have gone helps for the public to get value for money. In addition to that, we have another layer of oversight that is availed to us as county executive. We have county assemblies that oversight county executive. They are the ones who represent their people, but they also hold us to account as far as project implementation and appropriation of resources is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think quite a number of comments on public procurement, which, as I noted earlier, shows its importance in the PFM cycle. As the Director General from Ghana noted, you cannot automate it in isolation of the other aspects of the public financial management system. Unfortunately, in most countries, it's the only part that is not automated, because they have automated the planning through budgets, they have automated the payment through the IFMIS, but they have not automated the public procurement system. So that's what I was talking about earlier, that it's still the weak link in the value chain of PFM. So we need to put effort in that. I would conclude by saying that yes, automation on its own is not a magic bullet, as Favour said. We need to have certain tools that enable us to achieve the overall objectives of these reforms we're talking about. The red flag system, which alerts you on where something is going wrong, advanced data analytics, the open contracting data standards, the open contracting for infrastructure data standards for implementation, and then lastly, stakeholder coordination. Every player in this cycle needs to be involved. Development partners, the government, civil society, and ultimately the citizens, to understand their use, what they need, and then incorporate all that in as far as automation is concerned, because all this has to have an ultimate purpose of service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to throw light on the Director General's comment about automating the entire process, and I think that's a brilliant idea. So for countries that are making use of the integrated financial management system, I think it is high time that we begin looking in that direction. role of every process, and we can have that synchronized into our processes. And I think this system is usually housed at the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, like it is in my country. In closing, corruption is an ongoing fight. So to all of us, let's keep out this discussion. I think this forum like this provides an opportunity for us to not just share, but also learn. And I think it has provided me the opportunity to gain some other insight into what some of the panelists brought to board. So I just want to say thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. Thank you very much, delegates, for joining us for this session, and especially so for your patience during this meeting. I do invite you for lunch. We'll have ushers who will be able to direct you downstairs. Thank you very much again.